Good afternoon, good morning to everyone who's able to join us. Thank you so much. I'm Gavin Luter. I wear multiple hats, but one of the hats that I wear is Director of Strategic Engagement and Member Engagement at Transform Mid-Atlantic. I also work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Managing Director of the University Alliance. I'm also Managing Director of the EPIC Network, and I'm chair of the Place-Based Justice Network. So it's nice to see everyone here. Thank you so much for taking an interest in this topic. We are going to do some quick introductions, but first I'm going to hand it over to the Executive Director of Transform Mid-Atlantic, Madeline Yates, to offer a couple of minutes of welcome.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. And again, welcome, Becky. It is a delight to have absolutely everyone on this call. Quite remarkably, we have literally 150 people registered from 26 states and as disparate as California and Washington. So we really definitely piqued some interest here. But before we launch further, I just wanted to say how grateful I am that you are taking the time for this, because there is such a need. There's literally a huge need for our campuses to have stronger partnerships with and respectful partnerships and listening-centered reciprocal partnerships with our community partners. So some of you have brought vast years of experience and others are new to this work, but there are many other peers in the field, and we're just happy that you are here. Context-wise, we are less than 2 weeks from a federal election. We are witnessing all sorts of environmental disasters that are not unrelated to the science at the center of this and the community needs that we are here literally in our institutions, but also on this planet to do something about. We all have a tremendous capacity to act beyond that which we have tapped into. Part of that is what Transform Mid-Atlantic is about. Transform Mid-Atlantic is a nonprofit association of public, private, 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, including many historically Black colleges and universities, minority serving, and even a seminary. We are based in the Maryland, DC, Delaware, West Virginia, and Virginia region, and welcome campuses from across the country who are here with us today. We are also connected with the Partnership Alliance, which is an alliance of place-based colleges and university associations doing similar work to uplift communities, to bring justice to the culture of higher ed and center that work. And we are delighted that you are with us today. Transform Mid-Atlantic strengthens the capacity of our member institutions to enhance student learning and to meaningfully engage with communities. And that is exactly what Becky is here to talk about. So thank you. And Gavin, I'll pass it back.
Yeah, great. Thanks again, Madeline. I really appreciate your willingness to host the webinar here through Transform Mid-Atlantic. Part of the reason why we are hosting this is because I myself, as a community engagement professional, am one of those people who gets asked by faculty, hey, I have this great NSF grant that we've written and we figured it all out. Can you go find a community partner who wants what we've put together and get them to sign a letter of commitment? I'm sure that the 150 people who registered for this webinar have also had similar experiences of times when community partners have not been respectfully and meaningfully engaged in processes, especially through NSF processes. We wanted to bring in somebody from NSF to tell us their perspective on this. So credit to Becky. She wants this to be a very informal kind of interaction. So I was hoping that if people would be willing in the chat, just introduce yourselves, name and university. And if there's something specific that you really came here that you wanted to know about, or a topic that you'd really like to hear Becky talk about, please put that in the chat. So put that in there and we will monitor that. If there is something that you really have that comes up throughout the conversation and you wanted to interrupt or something, put something in the chat and we can kind of raise, like we can flag Becky and say, hey, Becky, would you be willing to talk about this? And so, yes, if you all could do that, if there are any special questions that you have, please put them in the chat. I will give a very brief introduction for Dr. Rebecca or Becky Shearman. She's a program director at the U.S. National Science Foundation, where she oversees a portfolio of initiatives aimed at advancing technological innovation and workforce development in areas critical to national and global interests. In her portfolio is the NSF Regional Innovation Engines program, which a lot of people are probably familiar with. She also stood up the NSF EPIC, which I got to say, as managing director of the EPIC network, love the acronym there. But that's Enhancing Partnerships in Inclusive and Innovative Communities program, which focuses on capacity building initiatives at non-R1 or research intensive R2 universities, including minority serving institutions and community colleges, to enable inclusive partnerships among diverse stakeholders to promote innovation and economic development. And the best thing, I think, about Becky is that she used to be a faculty member at Framingham State University. And she got really interested in this because she thought, hey, the best way to engage students in learning about the real world is doing real world respectful community engagement projects. And I'm just so thrilled that NSF has scooped her up and she is over these programs that can really help drive possibilities for universities to engage in this work in a meaningful way. So that is the introduction that I will give. And Becky, I will turn it over to you. We have people coming in the chat, and I will mention some things, but if you want to go ahead and get started. I mean, I see we have a lot of people introducing themselves. I haven't really seen anybody. I want to learn about establishing community advisory councils, partnership agreements to formalize community engagement, wanting to develop a faculty workshop on statements on social impact. Interested to hear if NSF and TIP are moving toward more inclusion of community engaged research practitioners on review panels. Very good question. Faculty associate. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing come up in the chat here. So yes, Becky, take it away, and I'll let you know if other things are coming up. We just saw some, Julia just said, be interested in hearing about how to effectively convey these elements of community-based engagement and asset-based approaches in applications focused on student learning. So yeah, Becky, now I will officially turn it over to you. Take it away, and thanks for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the invitation. I genuinely have been very excited about this invitation to come talk about these things. One, it is something I'm passionate about, but two, I think it's something that we all need to learn how to do better. Whether that's, us as faculty, us as federal agencies that are asking these questions of faculty and universities, or if it's the administration and other support offices that help faculty. I think we're all learning how to do this better. So it is something I'm passionate about. And as I believe Gavin mentioned, I did kind of find myself in this space. I was an academic. I guess once an academic, always an academic, right? So I'm still an academic. But I was very much a academic, right? I was an evolutionary biologist by training. I had a lot of molecular biology background, but I was always asking questions like, well, how did fish evolve out onto land? Or how did birds get into the sky? These are not questions that you're going to make any money off of. There's no startup companies coming out of this, right? There's no obvious job after investing time answering these questions. And for most of my young adult life, I never thought about that because I was so driven by I just thought they were the coolest questions that, like, and to the point where I actually hated the broader impact section, to be perfectly honest, of the proposals, because I was like, this is just cool. Like, I don't feel like, why do I have to justify it beyond that? Like, why wouldn't we want to invest money in these kind of questions? And now, like, I'm at 180, where I ended up spending a lot of time teaching at a wonderful school, Framingham State, which is a 4-year comprehensive. It trains the local community a lot of mostly first generation students, a lot of students from immigrant families. And yeah, studying dinosaurs does not have an inherent appeal to them the way it did to me. And I learned a lot about what our students want and need out of a good science education. And it really is seeing the practical value and application of those studies. So, you know, I'm teaching a bunch of students some introductory ecology, for example. My students are all coming from urban environments. So just going out into the woods, again, isn't enough to get them excited the way it was when I was a kid for me, because that was my experience as a kid. But urban ecology can completely reshape an ecology curriculum to get them engaged, because it is something that they can connect to. And this is just kind of an extension in my mind of that kind of work and that kind of thinking. So I do have a slide deck that I'll share, and we'll go through it. But as Gavin said, like, I'm really hoping that we can learn from each other here. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation. And stop me if I'm going down a path that you don't like. Stop me and put me on a different path, and we'll go that way. I'm really flexible here. Okay, where is my slide deck? All right, share. Okay, can everyone see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so this is my understanding of why we're all here today. And let me put a caveat to this, right? I am going to speak from a NSF perspective, right? I know the call for the talk was sort of federal investments, and I can't really speak for what's happening in other agencies, although I imagine there's some parallels. And obviously I'm most familiar in the way we think about things at TIP within NSF. So that's just kind of a caveat that that's the lens that I'm coming to you with. Right, so it's about broader impacts. Why? I think we all know, right? The official answer is to ensure that publicly funded research has tangible benefits to society that go beyond increasing knowledge. So right there, right, dinosaurs being cool is not enough. And this comes from the invitation that Transform Mid-Atlantic sent to me about the fact that more and more we're requiring researchers, faculty, and PIs to invite community members into the overall grant project to help ensure that there's a strong connection between community identified needs and research processes. And that kind of leaves us here. What do we do with that? We're not used to doing that, right? I remember broader impacts when it was like, I'm going to disseminate some of my results. I'm going to go to some conferences, right? Maybe I'm going to go pop into the local elementary school down the street and do a little thing. And that was usually sufficient to get a grant funded at least at NSF. And that's really no longer the case. We really do want to see meaningful community engagement, right? So what I was hoping we can kind of spend a little bit of time talking about, a couple questions, right? What might count? And I'm still right now calling it broader impacts, which is obviously broader than community engagement. But what would count? What might community engagement look like? And I'll share some of my ideas there. And then some chat. And so maybe I'll tee this up now. You know, after we do that, I'd like to ask us, what are the challenges? Right. And I'll tell you, my first slide to that is blank. I think maybe I put some words there, but it's mostly blank. And I'd love to hear from you all what you think the challenges are. I'll share kind of at high level buckets of what I think the challenges are. And then I'll throw out some ideas about how we may want to approach community engagement. And then maybe that spurs some thinking on your end that you can share back to me, and we'll see where this goes. Right? But like I said, hopefully we can all walk away from this better informed. And like I said, you know, in TIP specifically, we are really talking a lot about strong community engagement. And I think it would be unfair of me to say that we've got it all figured out. Right? So understanding your perspective is going to help us support your ability to do this better. Okay, so let's jump in. First of all, if you just Google broader impacts at NSF, there's actually a landing page specifically for broader impacts, right? Which is a nice place to start. Some of the links are a little bit old, but it's a nice place to start. And it actually, if you scroll down to the bottom, lists some examples of things that count to them, right? These are the sorts of things that qualify as broader impacts. And I think if you just look at these buckets, right, you can see community engagement in all of them, right? If you want to do any of these things well, maybe not infrastructure partnerships, but if you want to have an impact in economic competitiveness in whatever, whether it's your neighborhood or your discipline, right? You've got to have relationships with people for that to really translate into real economic competitiveness. I think we're all in the business of education and learning, right? Understanding who your audience is, who that community is that you're teaching, to have a real impact there. It is about effectively engaging that community. Broadening participation, I think it is exactly what we mean a lot of times, community engagement. We want broadening participation, public engagement. And I do think one of the things that we're going to keep circling back to is that box in the middle on the right, that partnerships, right? And, you know, I'm in the technology, innovation, and partnerships directorate. It is where we see a lot of the magic happen when we talk about community engagement and broader impacts. Okay, so I'm going to put aside all the challenges as a faculty member or a university itself around community engagement, and just make sure we're all kind of thinking about community engagement in a common way. These are my thoughts, my ideas, and I certainly don't want to come across like I'm lecturing to you about anything. I'm sure you all are thinking about these things. But we want responsible community engagement when we do reach out to the community. And what does that look like? You know, I think 3 big buckets for us to think about: making sure those engagements are mutually beneficial, both so that it's responsible, but also I think you're going to have the most success if your partner gets something out of it as well, right? So mutually beneficial. Whatever we're doing with the community, if there's a co-creation of knowledge, so you're building something with them, you're not just handing it to them or, you know, forcing it upon them, God forbid. And to go into it thinking about this as a long-term partnership, right? That this is not just a one-off thing to check the box. And I will say that, you know, I was just looking at all the everyone introducing themselves in the chat, and I will say I can't see the chat right now, so I'm completely blind if people are asking, like,
Don't worry. I was going to come on and ask something real quick.
Okay.
After you finish your statement.
Yeah.
Here.
So I was super excited to see all the universities and institutions of higher ed already represented on the call. The EPIC program, which is the background behind me, enabling partnerships. You may be able to read it. I can never remember the background of the acronym, but it's right there. That whole program is about giving, you know, creating an NSF funding mechanism for smaller institutions who we want to make sure have capacity and agency to be able to partner with larger universities, with big industry partners, with whomever they need to partner with for them to do their jobs better and have an impact in the community. And what we heard largely from, I mean, we've heard it a lot at NSF, right? That it has become an all too common thing that a proposal goes in from a large research institution. There's an expectation that they partner with someone or they add an MSI, and the MSI is not even aware that they're on the proposal, right? Like, they had a conversation with a faculty member at that MSI on some other grant. that may or may not have gotten funded, and now they're just using their name, for example. That's in a really egregious case, but these things happen, and that's what we're trying to change. So we are actually building out programs specifically designed for smaller institutions to be able to engage more in partnerships, and that's a part of your community.
Becky, we did have a question come in about, and I know that you have more slides, but looking at, what do you think NSF will be asking for regarding evidence in broader impacts reporting? What type of evidence would count? Like, how would we know that there are mutual benefits? How would we know there's co-creation of knowledge? How would we try to ensure that people aren't just named on grants and they
Right.
don't actually know it?
Right. No, so that's a really good question, and some of this is going to vary from program to program or from directorate to directorate, right? So with everything I say, the caveat is talk to your program director. Whichever program you're most interested in, have a conversation with them. But I will say, like for us, one of the first places I will look at to see if there's a real partnership there is in the budget. Whatever it is they're doing, right? And oftentimes what I see is, well, they're the smaller school, they're doing less work, so they get a very, very tiny fraction of the award. And this is assuming they're doing the work, right? Like that they're actually a partner in whatever's happening. But the reality is, if this is a small under-resourced school, they may have a outsized portion of the budget relative to what you would expect for the work not necessarily outsized for the whole scope of the budget, right? But what you may think your institution, if you're at a large school, would need, it may actually be bigger than that, not smaller than that. So those are one place. The other place is, in the body of the proposal, and then seeing that they're following up with doing those things. These folks are actively engaged, and you can see evidence of that through the outcomes that are presented in annual reports, etc.
I heard you say about other smaller schools, but what about nonprofit organizations or
That too.
CBOs or
Yep.
companies or local government, cities who are working on this stuff also?
All of that as well. And I will say, if like in TIP, we strongly encourage partnerships with industry. I would not want to see I would want to see the industry partner being willing to contribute their own resources to the project rather. So in those instances, I wouldn't necessarily go to the budget to look, right? But I would go to the facilities and resources section of the proposal to see what they're contributing. I may also go to sometimes you're allowed to put a letter of collaboration. So letters of support, I honestly don't put a whole lot of weight in or stock in. Letters of collaboration, where you can actually say, this is how I'm partnering, and it's from them, not from the lead organization, is another place to really demonstrate that.
And Becky, I think there was another kind of follow-up question, not just like evidence and documentation, not just in proposal writing, but also in reporting. Are there pieces of evidence you're looking for in reporting?
So that's hard for me to speak to broadly, right, across all of NSF. Right now, I am in a position where all the programs that I work on, which is the NSF Engines program, this EPIC program here, and Excellent, which is experiential learning for emerging and novel technologies. All of them require partnerships. All of them encourage partnering with, they encourage cross-sector partnerships. So with industry, with nonprofits, etc. And so it's kind of baked into the proposals, into the projects. So they can't be successful in their intellectual merit or anything else without reporting, like, well, what has your partner done, right? They're integrated in. If you're applying for a more basic research or even if it's use inspired research, it's still a fundamentally research project, and the partnership is there really as a way to do the broader impact requirement of the respond to the broader impacts of the solicitation. It may be that it's called out in the solicitation itself. But if not, you probably have a lot more flexibility there. But any way you can demonstrate how that partner has been engaged in the work, right? So if you think about a standard NSF annual report, you're reporting on kind of progress towards the outcomes, any outcomes that you've had in the past year and what you plan to do in the next year, making it very clear who did what in the project, right? Oh, this nonprofit organization through this work did X, Y, and Z, right? Or how they've benefited, right? There's also sections in the annual report about the outcomes. Make it clear that it wasn't just the community, right? But if an organization that you're partnering with found some benefit, add that into your annual report. Talk to them before you fill out the annual report. Like, to ask them, how has this been of benefit to you? And really just make sure they're central to the content of the annual report. That's pretty generic. I think beyond that, it's really looking at anything that may be explicitly outlined in the solicitation or what the program officers have conveyed through the just the work of the program.
Yeah, Becky, I'm testing you on whether or not you actually want me to interrupt and bring in questions
Definitely.
from the chat
Please.
here. Because there was another one about, what are the mechanisms to recognize and value the input of people beyond the university? So nonprofit partners, maybe other universities, K-12 schools, cities. When strict hierarchies are often built into the structures of the university and federal funding agencies, and maybe even the initiative itself. Like, I've been part of an AI Institute thing where the hierarchy is led by these professors, and then there's some sort of external advisory group stuck way out here. And, it's really just their friends who have gone from academia to industry, and it feels like not genuine, I guess. So anyway, yeah, just some of the strict bureaucracies and hierarchies that are built into these structures. How do you kind of overcome that and show that there's actually outside groups who have meaningful input into the process?
So, Gavin, is the question how, and I don't know that I'm going to have an answer either way, to be upfront about it, but is the question, how do you overcome the bureaucracy to have a real partnership, or is it about reporting, like showing evidence of it back to, say, NSF, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if Mary is on where you could, and also Elaine +1 this. I don't know if you all could clarify your question. I mean, I have what I think you're asking, but I don't know if Mary or Elaine want to clarify. Elaine?
I can jump in. I don't see Mary, so I don't want to speak for them, but I want, the co-investigator model, in our current NSF, we are working with community partners who have a lesser role because of the structure of the project, and yet they are leading the community, the community data piece. Like what the criteria for the data that we collect, the how we use impact, they're leading all of that, and yet they're not in this hierarchy. They are kind of an add-on extra because of the format. If that makes sense.
Because they can't be a co-PI.
Because they're not co-PIs, and because of even I'm going beyond, but even because at the university, the overhead is already taken off, so even the amount of funding is less. Those types of things,
Yep.
that are kind of baked in.
Yeah. Very true. Like I said, I don't know that I have the answers. I do think, I mean, to be honest, and I think we have to, when we're talking about community engagement, there's going to be an element of people have to want to do it, right? So at NSF, there's here's our program, and we want you to engage in with the community. And then there's going to be those programs where it's like, here's our program, and here are going to be some requirements that we need to see. Right. So in that case, I would say the latter are the NSF programs where NSF is saying we really want to make this happen. So we're going to go the extra step and do these things. And then I think the same is going to have to happen on the flip side, right? You're going to have folks who are like, well, this is the structure within which we have to work. And you can kind of use it as a way to justify less than. Or it's like, well, this is how we have to work right now. That's not great. What can we do within the current system while we try to make it better? And I think it sounds like there's people on both sides that are trying to make those changes, right? And I guess I'm framing this as like, we all have to find opportunities to one, try to take responsibility to make the change and then communicate back. So like, this is a great opportunity. Why I was excited to be on this call was because it's not always clear to me what those barriers are for you all. And in sometimes we can build programs to reduce that, right? Or we can say, yes, and in part of your reporting requirement, we want to make sure we hear from these folks. Or when we have a PI meeting, we want to make sure those folks join us, and we're going to offer supplements to help them travel here, right? We can do things like that to try to elevate. Now, I'm saying this to you all here. That does not mean if you call up your program officers and say, hey, I've got this great idea. How about you pay for all of us to bring the nonprofits that are doing great work for us, right? But in programs, that may be something that's happening. And the more I can hear of those things that can lower those barriers, that's things I can try to socialize on my end to try to change that culture. And my colleagues, I've got a lot of great colleagues who are looking for ways. And then hopefully there are folks on your end that are saying, okay, well, we can't change the negotiated overhead, but maybe we can take a bigger cut. We can take out a bigger portion of the dollars that we're using for this grant to give it to this nonprofit, because there's another place we can pull some money that we can use, right? So we can, I think that's just the reality where we are right now. Sometimes we have to get creative to find a solution.
I see that Mary actually is here. I think Mary was the one who originally asked the question. Mary, do you want to come on and clarify or respond?
Yeah, I'm thinking about processes like, for example, putting together a bio sketch, right? Our community partners are oftentimes even sort of on the outside of systems that would allow them to engage in the processes that would make it possible, even regardless of their academic qualifications or experience. They're excluded from these internal processes. They're not linked to a university. So it makes it extremely difficult even to list them, for example, as a PI or as a co-I. And I think I heard, I don't want to put words into Elaine's mouth, but I think I also heard some of that reflected in what Elaine was sharing as well. So I think for me, one of the big overarching questions is how can we structurally create an environment that makes it possible even for us to recognize the valuable contributions of the community members that we are asking to be part of our work.
Yeah, Mary, I think you raised some great points there. That bio sketch is brutal. Even, I mean, you can have an industry partner from with a ton of resources, and that bio sketch is a barrier because they don't approach their scientific career the same way academics do, and it just doesn't translate well. I do think there's a lot of places at NSF that are aware of that. I know, for example, in the Engines program, we grappled with that quite a bit, and we've made lots of, where we weren't running into policy issues, because sometimes we're just stuck, right? So, okay, you're gonna have to submit a bio sketch. as long as we know that that's not where the bulk of the information about your qualifications is going to reside, put it in whatever it looks like, and, you know, add a supplement, an attachment that's a resume or something else that we can use, right? We can't always do that based on policy, but there's some times when we can, right? And that we're doing that in post-award for engines right now. So I do think that, you know, those sorts of issues, this is where I think communicating opportunities for you all to communicate back to NSF so that we can figure out how we can best do this and lower those barriers can be,
And
and not, we got a lot of bureaucracy, so.
yeah, and Becky, I mean, to your point earlier, we really do hope that this is part of a conversation, you know, because I do think some people have, you know, hey, like we just had a question that came up of like, are reviewers or review panels
Yes.
trained to discern respectful and responsible partnerships from ones that are just kind of rip-off partnerships where people don't even know? So I think like there's probably a host of things that are going to come from this of like, wouldn't it be great if we could help
Yes.
you with the training on this? Or wouldn't it be great if we could create something in ORCID or in Science CV that's specifically for a community partner? And it's not about publications, but it's about tangible things and impacts that they've been able to get in communities over their 20, 30 years of experience, but they just don't have publication. So it doesn't look good when they have
Right.
to create the bio sketch or something like that.
Right. Gavin, I think that's, you know, if we can figure out ways to get those resources to those partners, so it's not hard for them to build out a bio sketch and they don't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to translate what we're looking for. And then on the other side, we're informed, we know what to look for in a bio sketch for a non-academic partner that may, you know, so know from our lens that it's going to look a little different. You know, looking for those things I think are fantastic. I will say, so to the question in the chat, our reviewers and review panels trained to discern respectful and responsible partnerships. I would say it depends, which is what I am learning is kind of the tagline of all things NSF. You ask someone from NSF a question and they're going to probably say it depends. But it really does depend on the panel and the program. I would say it should. The answer should be yes in all cases. I know, so in all of my programs, partnerships, cross-sector partnerships are essential. And so our panels always reflect that, right? If I have a program that requires the project to include community folks, industry folks, local government folks, I'm going to get people who have experience in those spaces on my panel. So that, I don't know if it's trained, right? They're not trained, but they know, they've been in those positions, so they know what to look for. They know what the hard questions are to ask the rest of the panel. And so we tend to have really good conversations in these panels around those sorts of things. And I will tell you, like the panels that I've been in the last couple of years, you know, they know how to look through that budget and say, this is not a partner. Like they do not, you know, they have no interest in actually working with these folks. So I think it really is about who sits on the panel. I think that represents another challenge, right? The entire merit review process with panels, which I actually have come to really appreciate. I think you get a good set of panelists and you have a well-run panel, and it is a great opportunity. I do think it is a really good process, as long as you are keeping bias front and center so that you're addressing any those, you know, that addressing it head on so that it doesn't sway anything. I think it's a really effective thing. The problem is that there is also an inherent bias for academics to serve on panels. It's very hard to ask someone from a community organization to give up 2 days of their time to serve on a panel. And even if we could pay them more, it's still very, like, even a lot of money doesn't necessarily combat all the challenges of getting them to engage, because in a university, the university thinks it's great for a faculty member to go serve on an NSF panel, right? So it's mutually beneficial, right? So in a lot of ways, I think NSF has to figure out a way to become a better partner if we really want those reviewers. And I don't know what the answer is there, but that's the latest thing that I'm seeing that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I see Anne
Yep,
to
and
me. You're on mute. Ann.
I'm on mute. Thanks so much for hosting this. Apologize. I came a few minutes late, so maybe you talked about this already, and I think it's relevant to what you were just saying. But you're one program officer, right? And I'm wondering, because I've applied to different directorates, different programs. I've served on panels, and I haven't found that focus on going beyond like a linear model of impact, like trickle down, where you disseminate out the information at the end. And I'm wondering, do you think that your perceptions and experience are like being more shared across NSF? And it's like, is there will or interest in potentially, changing the mandate? Or I'm just wondering, like, do you feel like you're speaking more for your particular programs, or do you think you're speaking more broadly for where the organization is going? Thank you.
yeah, and thank you for that question. So I will say that my perspective is honestly, it is skewed, right? So our Technology Innovation and Partnerships Directorate,
I was going to say you're in a very unique directorate who
yes, I
values
am.
partnerships.
Right, it values partnerships, and we also, are part of our mission, right? So a lot of times people will think of TIP as like, oh, they're the wing of NSF that's just trying to commercialize, get startups out of research, right? But really, we like to say we want to translate to impact. In a lot of cases, a startup could be an impact, right? You could to make CEOs and create businesses. That's great impact, but there's a lot of other ways to translate research to impact. And this community engagement piece is a big part of that. And since partnerships are kind of baked into what we do, we are thinking a lot about that. So I think it's beyond just me and my handful of programs. I do think it is wider across TIP, but I do know that, they are, I think you can track, I think NSF, if you go to the broader impacts page at NSF, they track sort of the cadence in which the National Science Board takes a look at the merit review process, and broader impacts are, I think, being discussed again. So I know there is an interest to kind of, okay, how do we take an assessment of how it's being done and what's the next phase for that. So that's, I don't know what the timelines for those things are, but that's something to certainly keep an eye out on. Keep an eye on the broader impacts page, because they put out those reports every couple of years.
And I do think, Becky, again, I mean, to get to Ann's point, like if there are opportunities to work with other program directors or people from other directorates where we could be like, hey, here are people who meaningfully want to engage community partners, and these are the barriers that they've come in contact with, or these are the things we think they should be looking out for. If there's an opportunity to do that, I think we could probably mobilize through our national networks people who could kind of provide those perspectives.
Definitely.
Miranda, did you have a question or anything like that? We just saw that you came on. Just wanted to say hi. Yeah, I wanted to also, Becky, there was another question that came in from Julia from DePaul University. And I don't know if you have anything within your portfolio that speaks to applications that might be focused more on student learning or like documenting impacts for student learning, but interested to hear about how to effectively convey elements of community-based engagement, asset-based approaches in an application specifically focused on student learning. So maybe they want to complement the student learning with community engagement. Is there anything about how to kind of convey this to NSF that there are real community engagement things going on in these applications focused on student learning?
So I just want to make sure I want to make sure I understand the question. I also want to make sure, it sounds like, I guess what is the motivation for that? And I don't mean to I think it's phenomenal. But is it because there's an expectation that the awardee does this work and we don't know how to make sure that work is being recognized? Is it because NSF should just know that this is happening? Right? Because I think depending on the why, my answer may be a little different.
Yeah, I don't know, Julia, you want to come on and clarify?
Yeah. So the grant we're applying for is student focused. It's all about enhancing STEM education, but we are going to involve a lot of community partners. They're going to do asset-based participatory research, community-based participatory research. So I'm just struggling with how to focus on the research questions that are educationally based, but then effectively convey through our expertise, through our, sort of layered approach. How do we tell them that we're,
And in the proposal phase, not like,
we're proposing.
You're putting together the proposal and so these are the things that are popping into my head. One, talk to the program officers for sure if you haven't. Honestly, I think, and we're recording this, aren't we? I think that when you're in the proposal phase, and this is I don't mean this to sound trite, but follow that solicitation, right? And I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time demonstrating a whole lot of those things if that's not what the funding call is asking for. Right? And it's hard for me to say this because just personally, these are the things that was where my passion lies. So I would want to just this is all the wonderful things that we're doing. But when you're in the proposal phase, the name of the game is getting the money. And the best way to get the money is to really break down that solicitation and make sure you are just hitting all the things in the solicitation. And if you can get it written and you can get a team of folks that can read it for you and be the most critical reviewers and get their feedback and use that to make that proposal stronger as it aligns with the solicitation, that's the way to do that. Now, if this piece is called out as a critical part of the program, then you've got to figure out how to weave that in there. And is it, where do you put it in the body of the proposal? How are you thinking about including those organizations as senior personnel or co-PIs if you can? What's it look like in the budget justification is another place for you to really lay on exactly the value that those people have to the project. And you don't have to worry as much about how it fits in the narrative of the project description, right? It's like this money is going to this person and these people are absolutely essential because they're doing blah, blah, blah. So it's another place to really demonstrate that impact. I hope that helps. I don't know.
Becky, I know that somebody actually asked, would you be willing to go through the rest of your slides? I know we're at the last 10 minutes, but I don't know if there's anything else in particular in your slides that you wanted to cover before we run out of time.
Yeah, so I am happy to share the slides. I honestly, I feel like this is a group of folks that are actively engaging or want to engage in community and then are trying to build it in. And I thought I was talking to people who do mostly just research and don't understand how to pull in, they're being told they have to do community engagement. I'm getting a sense that that's not who this group is. So like my level of excitement for this presentation went up just in my initial conversation with Madeline when I logged in. I'm like, oh, this is a different group. These are my people. But I can certainly share the
Well, but a lot of us are working with people
like
like the ones that you talked about who might not quite get it. And
Yep.
they're just like, hey, Gavin, can you get a community partner to sign off on this
right. So let me,
PFAS water quality grant?
yeah. Let me kind of walk through them, and just as a like, if you, and yeah, you can, I can give them to Gavin and you can share. Right. So you all know this, right? And whether or not this is helpful to share with people you're trying to pull into your tent, I don't know. But I listed the sorts of things that I think we're all talking about. It has to be about the relationship, but you have to be thinking about cultural sensitivity, accountability, mutual goals, communication. I think this whole slide is to say, don't think you can just add them, right? It's real work. That has to be, what are the barriers, right? I think these are probably the things, big buckets of things that I think our faculty struggle with. Well, I don't know anything about it. I don't have the expertise, right? What do I know about running a summer camp? Because the number of faculty who I've come across who think that's the answers. I'm going to do a summer camp for middle school kids. I'm like, is that really where you're going to go? Do you have expertise running camp for a bunch of 11, 12-year-olds? The logistics of it seem overwhelming. No one has the time to do it on top of everything else. And then sometimes, if you're me and you just want to study really cool fossils, you don't understand what that has to do with anything. And then I think at the end of the day, it comes down to this. I think it sounds like all of us in this room, the interest is there, right? But if they're not interested, what do you do? That's another hard one, right? If the PI on the research project isn't interested.
We hope to be able to say NSF cares about this.
Exactly.
And that's why you should care about it. And
Right.
they're looking for authentic community engagement in their proposals. And here's
Right.
how they're measuring that kind of thing.
Absolutely, right? So again, to my point earlier, if it's not in the funding call, just get the money and just be as responsive to the funding call as you can. If it is in the funding call, then you have leverage, like for whoever your academic partners are, to build out a good proposal. Like if you want to be responsive to this, you've got to have good community engagement. This is what it takes. This is what NSF says it takes, right? But some things I do like to just remind people, the goal here is to have impact on society, which is very different than the intellectual merit piece, right? In the science part, we're always like, well, is this transformative research? Is this innovative? Is this going to really change the paradigm? You don't have to do that for this. For broader impacts, oftentimes find something that works. Find the people who are doing the good work and leverage it. Don't be innovative, because that's a good way to fall on your face when you're trying to engage with community, right? So the things that I often tell PIs who really don't know what to do is to just start by thinking about their ecosystems. Think about your research ecosystem. Think about your regional ecosystem, whether that's your community, whether that's industry in your area, other colleagues on your campus. What do those ecosystems look like for you? And where can you find commonality in goals that are tied to broader impacts? Because that's the beginning of the conversation. That's where a relationship can begin. And that's where you may be able to find something that you can do. You can find those opportunities for collaboration so that, back to the last slide, you don't have to start from scratch, right? So I do think community engagement is all about finding good partners. That's really at the heart of it. And then the other thing was, as I was thinking about this, and this is like my last slide, I think I have, right? Also, you may not be in a program like, or applying for funding for programs like TIP, right? That are in TIP. But there's a lot of programming that is coming out that do this kind of work. So maybe if you've got faculty who are resistant or struggling in this space, it's about partnering with a group that has funding and is doing this kind of work. So for example, some of the programs that came to mind just around capacity building, I talked about enabling partnerships to increase innovation capacity. That's what EPIC stands for, right? These are schools that now have money to partner. So if the topic aligns, they are looking to partner, right? There may be a lot of mutual benefit there. This isn't necessary, and whether it's actually bringing them on as a sub-awardee to your project or just working in true partnership, you may find something there, right? Anywhere where NSF is investing in capacity building are going to be institutions that may be looking to leverage partnerships. Now, you've got to approach it respectfully and meaningfully, right? Like you want to make sure you're guiding your faculty well on those things, but there may be opportunity there. Same way, like we've got the first round of regional innovation engines. There's no reason why an engine who is already aware of, like, we are talking about this all the time to them. It's got to be a meaningful partnership. We need to see it. We do quarterly reviews with them. We're traveling out there. We know what those partnerships look like because we travel out there and we say, bring in your partners. We want to see them. Right? So there's opportunities to connect in where they may be able to get to that community engagement by leveraging some of these other programs. That would be a place I think your faculty can start. And then don't just look at NSF. Look at other federal programming.
Becky,
we have 2 minutes left, so
we did have another question that came through about basically trying to get faculty to reflect on their processes. I don't know if you see Betsy's question here,
yeah.
but basically, what they need to change about themselves, their own biases, how they run their lab meetings, and that can lead to insights about how to do broader impacts better. But is there anything that NSF might be able to do to review and assess that kind of commitment to doing the work among faculty?
So that's going to depend on the program. I did forget. You all are, I feel like you all have more expertise in this than I do, but I'm all out of whack now with the sequence of things because I just kind of grabbed things. One more, resources. So ERIS, if you're not familiar with it, everyone should leverage ERIS. Get your faculty on this website. They've got great tools on how to do a broader impacts plan. They host meetings. They've got a ton of resources. I've worked very closely with ERIS to build out our EPIC program. So highly recommend getting your faculty engaged there for resources. I put this one up, and a reason I was reminded of this with that question. So I would look for whatever discipline that faculty person is in, look towards their professional development, their societies, their academic societies. For example, if that faculty member is in the computer science space and they get funding from SIZE at NSF, that stuff that you're talking about absolutely would count towards broader impacts for almost any proposal, I think. So they have a broadening participation in computing, and anything, they need a broadening participation plan for almost all the proposals that get submitted. So that's obviously unique to computer science, but I would say you may want to look for that equivalent in other directorates. And then of course that broader impacts page, there's links. This is so that's the top of the website. If you scroll down, there's some links. I think ERIS is actually linked here, but there's some resources you can look at for that as well. But I would say, unfortunately, again, it depends on the program, right? Like I would say, like computer science, yeah, I have no doubt that you get a lot of credit for doing that kind of professional development for the faculty. I don't know what it's like in other directorates. And I
Well,
see
thank
we
you
have-
so much, Becky. I know that we don't have much time left, but thank you very much. And we hope to continue the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope it was
Yes,
valuable.
thank you so much, Becky. I think one of my great takeaways was that what was the transition point for you getting into this field was understanding that it is what most connects with your students. It's really, it
Absolutely.
was the fact that this is what your own students need. And it's what our communities need. And it is with and by the community. It is not for, to, or at. That's for sure.
Exactly.
All
I
right.
see.
Thank
Couldn't
you
have
all.
said it better myself.
Thanks, Becky. Take care, everyone.
Bye.